Welcome back to Neon Galactic, a podcast produced by PBS affiliate Keat TV in Northern California. I'm your host, James Falk. Thanks for joining us. Marco Visconti, magician, musician, educator of the arcane arts, and someone who has worked very hard over the past several years to make the practice and pursuit of magic with a K more accessible to the average person through his book, the Aleister Crowley Manual, and through the classes he teaches online and in person, sometimes with the help of a famed cultist and recent UAP juggernaut, Peter Levenda. Visconti is a bright light in these fields. He has helped to lift typically obscure and esoteric subject matter out of the shadows and make it more available to generalists like myself and the now emerging multitudes who are just discovering the possibilities. His book on Crowley and Thelema is very much a manual. It starts the reader from scratch, and using clear language, correspondence tables, and a patient attitude, it helps them develop a fruitful and eventually sophisticated personal practice that shuns much of the dogma, revels in mystery, yet delivers practical results. In an era when these ideas and philosophies are gaining new currency and humanity seems to be finally confronting the presence of non-human intelligences and cosmic archetypal forces, Visconti is acting as a guide, docent, and teacher. This is our second conversation, and it's an absolute privilege to have him back on the show. We'll explore his book, his thoughts on the UAP subject, his partnership with Peter Levenda, and the modern human spiritual condition. Also, of course, we'll get to the magic. Welcome to the show.
Well, James, thank you so much for having me once again, and thank you for the glowing introduction. I'm humbled. Thank you very much.
No, I really appreciate your presence online. I mean, mostly I see and hear your input through what used to be UAP Twitter, and now it's UFO Sky.
UFO Sky,
But
yes, indeed.
yes, and a little bit more positive platform, I think. But it's always welcome, and you keep me humble with your level of knowledge. And the one thing I appreciate most, and this is probably what I would like to focus on most, is the idea that the rational brain doesn't need to necessarily grok all of the details and put it in some sort of sense-making order, and I have a
Yeah.
really, really hard time with that because I approach this conceptually. So that's often my mission, is to try and understand it in a way that I can kind of lay it out and explain it to folks. And there's, I think in some sense that's futile, not something I'm going to be able to ultimately accomplish. But we'll get there. Let's start a little bit first with your book, and then after that, maybe we can get into sort of the connection between ufology and the occult, and go from there. But your book is fantastic. It
Thank you very
really
much.
has a
Thank you,
lot
thank
in
you.
it. If you are approaching from a position of ignorance and you have no idea really what to do, it absolutely lays out. I mean, from my perspective at least, all you'd need to really get started on understanding what's at play, what the mechanics are, and the tools you'll need, and all of that. Um, I remember last time we talked, you said that there was some resistance from some folks in the occult world to that kind of approach, where it's like
Yeah.
it's better to keep it difficult and mystical and draped with whatever
Strange
difficulty.
language and
Yeah.
arcane, floral language, right? Yeah, I mean, it's been ongoing. I mean, once again, thank you for really understanding, what was my scope when I wrote this book. And in fact, what I think my work is all about. I'm trying to not water down this subject matter, which is, as we maybe will discuss, like it's impossible to water it down really when we go to the core of it.
Yeah.
It is a complex practice, it is a complex philosophy, and it is something that its complexity is in the fact that completely changes the way the common person sees the world, sees themselves as part of the world, right? That is impossible to make it to not to decomplexify too much it. But I think that what is possible to do is to render the entry level, like lowering down the entry level, so that everybody truly can have a shot at that, right? And if you think about it, this is exactly what we've done as humans through our entire history, right? Like we created we'd create like a sort of pedagogy where you start simple and you get complex, right? Whereby it seems to me, I mean, I know for a fact, it's not that it seems to me so much, I know for a fact that in my world, in the magic milieu, especially in the thelemic milieu, so thelem, of course, being my specific type of magic, but I'll tell you, it's the same in Hermeticism, it's the same in Rosicrucianism. There's a lot of gatekeeping for all the wrong reasons, in the sense that I have evidence by now, no doubts in my mind at all, that their gatekeeping is all about the few who, to be fair, toiled and did the work to get there, to feel better about themselves by putting more and more bumps along the road, whereby it could be definitely accepted that an entry level can and should be for everybody. And this is what I'm trying to do. I've been trying to do for many years now. Thankfully, the book has been very well received. I think we mentioned it last time in our previous discussion. It's sold, I mean, I think around 10,000 copies as of today, which, for it's not much, but it's not a bestseller, by, I don't know, Louis Elizondo's, that just
Yeah, but
names
not,
somebody
yeah,
with a book out, or even Peter. I mean, Peter Levenda sells a lot more because, of course, like they have bigger scopes. But I speak of very niche subjects, and and that number is, I can tell, is unheard of, right? I don't know if it's gonna keep on. I don't know, but I've been very happy with that, and we will see. I mean, I just finished writing my second book. It is in the hands of the editor now. It will be out in a year from now, pretty much to the day. So November 2025.
what's
And
it
that will
called,
be a
if you
little
don't mind
bit.
me asking?
Sorry.
What's it called? What's your new book going to be called? Can
Well,
you say?
the new I'm going to give you a little preview. The title is Aleister Crowley's Mysticism: A Practical Guide.
Okay.
So we're going to carry on all the discourse we started in the first book. We're gonna get a little bit more complex, and we're gonna get a little bit deeper. And if the previous book was about magic, which in many ways, as I said in the book, is everything you can do, the other side of magic is, in fact, mysticism, and that's something that you need to experience on a more deeper level, right? And they are really, like, I see them as two sides of the same coin. Aleister Crowley himself saw it as this coin made of these two sides, magic and mysticism going hand in hand. And in many ways, magic is the gateway towards mysticism. And I called it a practical guide because even if it will touch on much more complex subjects, I still try to use simple language. I still try to, I mean, we're going to analyze 3 or 4 key rituals in that, like the Liber Samek, the Abramelian ritual, Liber 8, Liber Astarte, but we're going to do it, I mean, I'm going to break them down the same way I did, with the previous book. Now, one thing, like in the first book, one thing a lot of people enjoyed it was the fact that there was a lot of like clear graphics and especially because a lot of those rituals were very ceremonial in nature. So you have to move into the quarters, do specific signs and gestures. This new one won't have much of that because, of course, the nature of these new rituals, more advanced rituals, are mystical. So much more like inward, if you want, as opposed to outward. But thankfully, I will have very beautiful bespoke illustrations in it. So I hope that will help. I mean, maybe exalt some of the seeds that are already put into our own DNA, if we want, so that people will read it will be the same way they were inspired to take up these practices. They will keep doing it with the next one. We'll see. It's still like it's strange. Like writing a book is very much like producing an album, which was something that I've done a lot in my life. And of course, you produce an album, you write the songs for various months, and then you spend enough time to mixing, mastering, and mixing, and all of that. And then maybe it takes another 6 months, 9 months, a year before the album comes out. Same thing with a book, right?
Yeah, yeah.
So
And
yeah.
that 6 month period must be pregnant with like anxieties and I mean,
Uh,
anticipation and all of that.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah.
I learned not to think about it. I learned that the best way of avoiding those double thinking, like should I go back and write something again, or back in my music days, should I mix it again, add more bass, add more guitar, add more synth? You just let it go. It's gone. It's in the world. It is what it is. You just start writing new things. And
Yeah.
so, in fact, I'm already planning, book number 3 as it stands, right? But I'm still very much in the very, very early stages of that. We'll see. We'll see where we will be maybe in a year time.
No, I mean, so like one thing that I think maybe I picked up, and correct me if my understanding is wrong, but like the difference between magic and mysticism is sort of the difference between doing and being. Is that kind of a
Yeah,
fair way to
you're
put
you're
it?
very correct. I would say that
Okay.
is exactly it. And the difference there is that, you do something whenever you're still identifying yourself with what I call, the mask, like Marco or James, like whoever we are here, we are incarnating in this space-time continuum, in these things we call life. When we still like very much identify ourselves as this mask of incarnation, then we do things, right? And in fact, these magical practices can help us not so much as to detach from that, because it's always us. The mask is us in many ways. As long as we are incarnated in this space time, we are. I'm Marco, you are James, exactly. But those magical practice help us going a little deeper from that mask, maybe something like an inch deep, 2 inches deep, and realize that there is a mask and there is a something that is wearing that mask, and that is the being, right? So that
Yeah.
is when all the mystical practices can come up to the surface, and then maybe take you even further onto this experience, right? Because again, once you finally have recognized that self that is wearing the mask, in magical terms, we're talking about the knowledge and conversation with a holy guardian angel. The holy guardian angel being that such a loaded term, but that is in fact, a magical way of calling that inner self. Um,
Yeah.
the term self, I want to say it very
Yeah.
clearly here. The term self is loaded. This is not the higher self of psychology. There's some similarities with the Jungian concept of the self, but it's not exactly the same. Famously, there is a school of magical practitioners who call like the ones that propose the psychological model of magic, that actually go all the way Jungian, right? I'm not one of them. I'm much more in the energy spirit camp.
Yeah.
And maybe we can have a discussion about all these things. In the new book, I try to explain what these various models are, and the fact that I do think that the best way to approach this is actually to realize that maybe we need all these models at different times. Like as our understanding deepens, as our practice refines, we can move from a model to model. The same way with science, we think of a theory, and then we falsify the theory, and then a better and stronger theory comes along. It's kind of
Yeah.
the same approach, similar approach. Sorry.
Well, so
So
here's
yeah, but you're very right in the doing versus being. I would say just yeah.
it's interesting to me. So I read some theosophy over the past year,
Hmm.
and I got pretty deep into some of it, and I was absolutely fascinated by it, especially the aspects of sort of the astral travel and like, I mean, the ascended master element where there's are
Hmm.
like beings that are sort of human but not human or sort of supremely human,
Yeah.
and they talk a lot about the different levels of the body, right? Like you
Hmm.
have the physical body, and then you have the subtle bodies, and it sort of goes up in graduated spheres, I guess, and it sort of
Yeah.
corresponds to the spheres of being. Where does the holy guardian angel fit in that? Because I know with theosophy, there's a part in your soul or in your being that is a shard, say,
Yeah.
of the divine. And over time, as you spiritually develop, you build a body around that
Hmm.
spiritual shard, and it becomes more whole and complete. Um, is that what you're referring to as a holy guardian angel, or is it the highest evolution of the eternal self? Like, you know what I'm saying? I
It,
mean,
it's it, it's both in a way, in the
okay,
sense that
okay.
what you're describing, you're describing what I call a map of reality, right? The theosophy is one of the many, and for instance, Hermetic Kabbalah is yet another. But in fact, as humans, what we're very good at is looking at the universe around it and trying to map it, right? Trying to
Yeah,
find
which
a
is
way to
exactly
make,
what I was saying earlier, what
yeah.
I'm trying to do, and maybe that's not the best thing to do, but I can't
No,
help
no,
it.
no. But well, but you know what? You cannot avoid doing that, right? In
Yeah,
many
yeah.
ways, you must do that at first, and it's very good that we had the opportunity to, especially in this day and age of information, that we can actually look at all the various maps of reality that have been tried and tested by other humans across history. Of course, theosophy was a huge influence in the type of magic I studied and practice and teach, because Theosophy was there before the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn, and the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn was directly, the step right before Thelema and Aleister Crowley, right? Like that, it's almost like a lineage of thinking. And I would argue that this lineage of thinking actually goes back in time, and it touches many different groups. You can go from the Fedeli d'Amore and Minnesangers and the Troubadour in the Middle Ages in Europe, and then to Sufism, and then maybe back to Tantra, right? I do think there is a perennial philosophy that touches all the milestone of human evolution. But at the end of the day, what's important to understand that these are maps, right?
Yeah.
So what you describe is, in fact, the theory of the formation of the body of light and then the transmutation of the body of light into the body of glory. The idea that we do have, a shard of divinity into each one of us as it at our core, right? And then our magical practices, or Theosophists will say their Theosophist practices, Theosophical practices, help to recognize the shard and then pretty much like building up a series of layers that then not only make first the body of light, but then eventually, once all the layers are activated, that become a body of glory. So almost like at that point, there is a full connection between that shard of divinity inside of us, which is the mask that is worn by that shard of divinity, and the divinity that is outside of us. Almost like we become part of this fractalization of divinity into humanity and maybe somewhere else as well, right? Okay, yeah. We become part of this continuum. If you ever saw Alex Gray's paintings, the very famous painter that also did all the graphics for the band Tool, you always see this strange human-like being that are made of other phases and they go up and down. I mean, that's the idea, right? That's exactly it. In my book, I speak of the body of light because in particular, the body of light is, again, it's a useful map of reality to realize that we can use these practices to build these 7 layers in our body of light, which is all subtle body, right? Because of course it's not a body that's visible, but it's a body that can be perceivable. Like it's almost like we can awaken these 7 other senses, right? That are also neatly mapped on the 7 planets, the Hermetic planets, of course, having, Sol and Luna as well, which of course we know they're not planets, and then having, Mercury, Mars, Venus, Jupiter, and Saturn. And then you have all these layers that can be mapped onto this planet. And then we can use rituals connected with these planetary energies to recognize these layers. Eventually, the knowledge and conversation of the Holy Guardian Angel is the moment where everything comes together. Like when you realize that the fullness of the body of light, with you at the center, with that divine shard at the core, it's also one with the universe. Crowley speaks of concepts of the Ku and the Cubs using terms from Egyptian Heka. It's a bit complicated to go into that, and again, this is where I think you need to sit down with this concept and try to make sense better than we can do here. But it's always the same idea, right? The idea is that we have this human experience, and we recognize that there's more to it, and there are a series of practices that can help us layer that experience till we reach a fullness of being. That fullness of being, I like to think of it as an egg, right? Because in many ways, in that moment, we are the babe in the egg, which is a very classic alchemical image. And it's an alchemical image of the great work completed, but also the fact that this babe in the egg, it's a new life that's about to spring forth. In Thelemic terms, we say that once you have obtained this fullness of being, this knowledge and conversation, what really happens is that you start seeing your incarnation outside the boundaries of cause and effect of linear time flow. You start to entertain the fact that maybe time, it's all out there, right? Like it's almost like we see, I mean, not to quote Rustin Cole from True Detective season 1, but we see life as it's not like it's a flat circle, right? I mean, I really like season 1 of True Detective. I think
Yes,
it's
absolutely.
yes,
It's
for me,
brilliant.
I mean, I love Twin Peaks. Everybody knows I love Twin Peaks, but True Detective season 1, it's maybe for me the best piece of television ever made. Anyway, I digress. But that idea of the flat circle, of course, I mean, he's very pessimistic. I try not to be, but it's not about like the fact that our lives is everything is predetermined. It's more like time and space exist from our perspective here in this world, right? Imagine, like, think of whenever we started this conversation. Where is that moment? Or think when we will be that the moment where we're finishing we were finishing this conversation. It's already there somewhere, but we're constantly here in this like constant vector that constantly moves. The knowledge and conversation, the fullness of being, helps you rise your perspective and see incarnation as a whole. But that's the moment where you can actually start thinking of going somewhere else, of going in other places where time and space do not exist. This changes completely your perspective on what death is, because death is an experience. In many ways, death is the only certainty we have. There's nothing else we know. We will never know if we will be rich or poor or happy or sad. We know we will die. So that's how it is. And the thing is, that is not the end, right? Like that is a moment where if you've done these practices, you are that babe in the egg, and the egg is finally cracking open. And that's when your next level quest starts, right? If you want to. And in many ways, this feeds into the whole idea of UAP, non-human intelligence. I'm shocked in all the positive ways by the level of conversation in that field right now. I never thought we'd get here. And this is also why I, as somebody who's been fascinated by these topics all my life, and I did everything I could to experience the other, and I did. I mean, I did experience non-human intelligence. I mean, I'm gonna sound, maybe I will sound very, bombastic for those of you who are listening to us now, but I do on regular basis. For me, it's nothing strange, right? It's been my entire life. I know how to contact these beings. I know how to manifest these beings, and many of them are, I would call them friends, in fact, because they are. I like to think of those non-human intelligence as, again, people that are they just don't have a body the way we think a body. It's not a physical body, but they're real. I have no doubts about it, right? The fact that the wider world is talking about these things with all the the birthing pains that this new perception is bringing, and all the doubts and all the discussions, to me it's incredible, right? But something that a lot of people must understand: this is nothing new, and this is not disclosure, because we don't need disclosure. This always has been the birthright of humanity. Our connections with these other beings there are plenty, right? There are a legion out there, and of course I'm saying this, and I already know that some of the more Christian disposition will say, "Oh, legion means they're demons." There are. It's like I say, there are people, right? Some people are good people.
Range.
Exactly. Some people are good people. Some people are people you wouldn't want to in your house, and that's how it is, right? It's the nature of the universe, and by universe I don't mean physical universe. I mean the universe that's physical, and I want to use even think about it. If think about even how in the span of 15 years we went to mass market movies that speak of the concept of multiverse. That was unheard of when I was growing up. I remember when I was reading comics growing up, and when they were starting, Chris Claremont, famously, the comic writer that wrote X-Men from the 70s to the 90s, made X-Men famous. Chris Claremont was never a member of Ordo Templarientis, but he knew a lot of people in Ordo Templarientis. The character Jean Grey was a magician in New York in those days. Peter knows her. I mean, she knows exactly what I'm talking about. I'm not naming the name. But Jean Grey, it was a real magician in New York and was Chris Claremont's girlfriend of the time. So just to let you know.
Yeah. So
This is
that's
how
stuff's threaded through, in other words, right? I
exactly, this is
mean,
how
yeah,
this
yeah.
idea keeps seeding in, and it takes all this time because we are at a moment in time, and again, since I'm a Thelemite, I think we are 120 years after the reception of the Book of the Law, which means after that there's been a change in the eons. That is, there's been a change of how of the general laws of the universe. Okay, uh, it took all this time for us to get here. But the reality is that 120 years, or the 40 years that has passed in my life, I'm 46 now. But when Chris Claremont was writing, I was a child. It's nothing. It's this blink of an eye, not even in what an eon is, right? So
Yeah.
in many ways, we perceive it as been a long time. Nothing happens very fast. Why are not disclosing? My friends, there's nothing to disclose. This is the human experience. It's always been like that.
Yeah.
It's that's it. I look, you mentioned that. I mean, all my work, the work I've been doing with Peter Levenda, and I'm so grateful to call him a friend, and the fact that he likes what I do, and that's how we became friends, right?
Yeah.
But like he wrote this book in 2008, Stairway to Heaven, which is
Yeah.
also the title of this retreat we're doing in Joshua Tree in a few months, in February, in fact. And I was like, when I remember when reading it the first time, I was like, I mean, this man gets it, right? Because again, the Stairway to Heaven, the book by Peter, and the course the retreat we're doing, it's all about showing how these ideas have been always part of human religions. Maybe not so much the exoteric part of religion, so
Yeah.
like the front-facing part, but the esoteric, the inner teachings were always about what Peter called celestial ascent. And in many ways, celestial ascent, the concept of celestial ascent, is another map of reality for what we just described before.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah.
Moving up from the human condition or the lead to
Yeah.
the divine condition or the gold. And again,
Yeah.
another alchemy, yet another map of reality, right? Yet
Yeah.
another set of practices, but the direction is always to the stars, always there. Oh, something happened here.
Well, you
It
raised your
just
hand and then the hand raised, which was really interesting.
exactly. Well,
You got powers, man.
I know. Look at that.
Um, That's fascinating to me, all of that you just described. And I mean, I've kind of been drug along. I mean, I started studying UAPs and UFOs, and that led me into this whole world of occultism and philosophy, and I mean, all of it, the gamut, right? And that's what's made it so rewarding for me is that it's like, it's not just flashy things in the sky, it's all this stuff that sort of comes along with it and has utterly transformed my life and the way I consider things and the way I live. And I deeply appreciate that. Having read Peter's books, the Sekret Machines trilogy,
Yeah.
and we had the conversation, and I was like, well, if someone wants to prepare themselves for what's coming with this UFO stuff, if there is, potentially going to be some sort of deeper form of contact, or, how do we approach that kind of thing? And he said, occultism.
Yeah.
Basically, like those are the defense tools. And so to me, I left that conversation feeling like if we can expect anything to come out of this UFO topic and the ongoing, whatever it is we're going through, it's going to be a deeper realization of that kind of reality for
Yeah.
folks who were previously didn't know it or whatever. That's going to continue to manifest itself more clearly in our lives. And
Absolutely.
so we need to begin understanding how that system works and, working towards something ultimately within those
Absolutely,
systems.
absolutely. And again, remember what I just said that, I mean, this has always been part of the experience of humanity, but I think that the current crop of mainstream religions long ago realized that control is a very powerful tool. And I'm not discriminating. I think all the religions of the book, all the mainstream religions have done the same, right? And control. What are they controlling really? Well, the flow of information and the fact that if you don't know that these practices are your birthright and everybody can can study them. I will be very honest with you, and I've been honest in my book and in everything I do. Like, it is true that some people are more apt at that naturally. Like some others will need a little bit more, time investment. But that's the same with everything in life, right? Like, I think we had this discussion before. Like, I like to play guitar, but I'm not particularly talented at that. I had to really, really, really like do a lot of like scales and practices like for years and years and years to do what maybe some friends of mine just picked the instrument and boom, they were playing like run along. It's like, wow, okay. And
Yeah, yeah.
that's the same with these practices. Like this is also why I insist that you need to be constant. You need to, Crowley famously say, let go of the lust of result, right? In the sense, let go of the need to confirm to yourself that A, these things are worth pursuing, and B, that you're getting some results. Because if you do that, it's almost like you are almost like become lazy on your practices because you don't see any results right away. But then again, try and pick an instrument if you never picked an instrument, and look how long it's going to take you to become even decent at it. And think of it like, then you may say you want to be, I don't know, Jimmy Page, or you want to be Joe Satriani. Yeah, good luck with that, right? Like
Yeah, yeah,
you
yeah.
will need a lifetime, and then
And
maybe
maybe not.
and
You may
maybe not
never get
exactly.
there.
Maybe you will never get there. You're correct, right? Maybe you will
Yeah,
never get there.
yeah,
But it is open to everybody. Everybody can pick an
yeah,
instrument. Everybody can pick these practices. And in many ways, as Peter was saying, prompted by your question, if you want to be prepared for what is going to be more and more out there in the world, because it's going to escalate, it's going to be exponential. Every year is going to be more than the previous one by a crazy amount. These practices will center you. Remember, it's all about finding that divine tether and center yourself around it. That is that is the body of light is also what's called like the aura, right? But the aura really is also the circle that the magician trace around him whenever they go to evoke or conjure spirits, right? If you look at the
yeah,
grimoires of old, you always need a circle around yourself, not just to protect you from, and this is why, like a lot of people say, like, I do the circle because these things are out there to kill me, they need to protect. No, that is your center. Like and think about it, that maybe can also be your spaceship, can also be your UFO if you want, like it also be your
yeah,
flying saucer, right?
yeah,
What if a magician, and this is Peter told this once, and it was like, yeah, good point. What if a magician that trace a circle around themselves and start the incantations, and it's somebody who's done the work diligently, and so is expanding his body of light as he does that. What if then that magician doesn't appear in another dimension as a UAP? What if
yeah,
the UAPs we see are magicians from other dimensions, from other vibrational and density levels that are doing the same thing we're doing because they're trying to communicate with us?
yeah,
I mean, I think that's exactly what it is, right? I think
yeah,
that's
yeah.
precisely
At
it.
least, some of it. Yeah, absolutely.
I also think, exactly. I also think that, of course, our governments and our religions, of course, the last 2,000 years, people in power tend to want to have control. People in power and want to control the flow of information and want to maybe control all the boons that might come from this information. I do believe I have let's put it very clear here. I have no direct evidence, but I do believe without problems that our governments had access to these connections, to these non-human intelligence connections, and they used it to their own advantage. Like I do think that a lot of the strange lights in the sky might be government, black ops that have been, reverse engineered, or people attempting, I do believe it because again, whenever we have this discussion, we always, I'm not always, a lot of people tend to think in binaries, right? It must be either
yeah,
this or that, either this.
yeah,
How about it's everything we can think and
yeah,
everything we are not
exactly.
even engaging with yet?
Yes,
Because
absolutely.
we are finite beings.
Hmm.
The rest of the universe isn't. Even the
Yeah,
physical universe, according to our scientific theories, is constantly expanding.
yeah,
It's infinite, right? And
exactly. Yeah,
we can all do this exercise for a second. So like close your eyes and breathe in and think of infinity. And then breathe out. you cannot truly grasp it, but there's a little moment right there. There's a tingling in the back of your head. I don't know if it happened to you, because
Sure. Yeah, yeah.
that's you reaching for that infinity. And
Yeah.
that, because what you're doing there in that, and this is a little exercise, everybody can do it. That's the moment where that divine core almost like flickers for a second, right? Because of course it's infinity concentrated into finite beings, into time and space. So what are these UAPs that we see in the sky? Everything. Like literally it's
Yeah.
everything. It's
Yeah.
non-human intelligence. Some are good, some are bad. Some have our best interest, some don't. If you go into the jungle, all right, and you are like me, a city boy, never been much outside. I think I camped twice in my life, and I didn't like it that much. Okay, yeah. If I go to the jungle, right, and I hear a million sounds, those are animals that completely ignore me, and there's some animals that are stalking me because and that's the same thing. So having a magical practice, like learning magic, I mean, I'm not even trying to to sell you my specific kind of magic. Learning a spiritual practice, starting that celestial ascent that Peter describes in his book, it's all you need to do to enter that jungle, being aware of what is
Yeah.
there. Because the thing is that if you don't do it, the jungle is coming for you tomorrow. Like I said,
Yeah.
we are in time. We are time. Time is. I feel like time is accelerating in a way.
Yeah. Well,
Um,
that's my next question for you is going to be what's driving this sudden, you mentioned like exponential growth over the years where it's going to be compounding, and also that we changed epochs.
mhm.
So what is driving this increased explosion of sort of occultic energy right now?
I'm going to give you my answer to that. So I'm not
Yeah, yeah,
pretending that this is the answer, right? My
yeah.
answer is, again, to be found in what Crowley used to call the succession of the eons. And so, there are moments in time when it's almost like the law of nature change, right? And why is that? We don't know. Crowley, used an Egyptian pantheon framework, saying that we moved from the aeon of Isis, which was matriarchal, which, by the way, from an anthropological standpoint, in 2024, we know that we don't really have evidence of a period of time in history where there was a strong matriarchal, widespread civilization. We don't have the archaeological evidence, but there could have been, right?
Sure.
And
Yeah,
this is
yeah.
maybe like reaching more in the mythical past. Then there was like the Aeon of Osiris, where was the more patriarchal side came to the forefront. And I would argue it's still very much around us, right? Because again, these eons do overlap. It's not like one day, boom, change, everything has
Yeah.
changed. Things overlap, right? And what again, to give you my answer, the final eon the one we're currently living in, is called the Aeon of Horus, or the Aeon of the Crowned and Conquering Child, and it's an Aeon of it's a childlike Aeon, right? So it's force and fire. Think of a young child that is very happy to be in the world, but it's very loud and very boisterous and maybe makes a mess around it. This is the energy that we just begun to embody. And again, if you look at the last 120 years, well, it's definitely true that we are living in the safest time in history. I mean, people are, despite all the horrors that we're almost forced to see again in the age of information.
Yeah.
I realize, and I'm a little digressing here. I recently not deactivated, but I deleted all my X or Twitter profile. Like this, I just don't use the platform anymore. It's been
Yeah.
2 weeks now. I am so less stressed than I was before.
Yeah.
Because again, we live in times where you're bombarded with it. But it's
Yeah.
also true, if you look at the statistics, that people die way less than they used to. There have
Yeah.
been less wars despite the last 2 years, right? Et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
That's the
But
problem
we are
with
at
the
the
information age is that we're so bombarded that
bomb.
they can tell us a story about what we're living and we believe it, but it's not
Yeah,
even necessarily true. We just can't tell the difference
absolutely.
because
I
yeah,
completely, for years and years and years, I advocated the need to be aware, to be politically active. I still believe these things, but I blocked out my access to 24/7 information from the left, from the right. I don't
yeah,
care. It's
yeah,
just
yeah,
because everybody has a bias and everybody's trying to sell you cortisol, and cortisol is really bad
Yeah.
for you,
No,
right?
that's exactly right. Totally. Yeah, yeah. No,
So
that's
yeah, I mean, I sit down with the news maybe once a week to try and be aware of what's still happening. But for the rest, unless I get, I don't know, breaking news that something terrible happened, in London where I live, then I just don't. Anyway, despite all of this, we are going to the energy of the eon of the child is going to be reckless and quick and fast. And so my answer to your question is because of this change in the heavens has happened, right? And it will take a long time. We will be dead and forgotten by the time that happened. We're talking like hundreds of years,
yeah.
where then still this phase will be stabilized, and the previous patriarchal age of Osiris will be completely gone, and
Yeah.
then a new paradigm would have formed by that time. But I really think, I mean, if you ask me how long, I think maybe, I don't know, 200, 300 years, 400 years, right?
Yeah.
All while experiencing this exponential change that the eon of the child brings along. The humans of tomorrow will be very different from us because they will live in an incredibly different landscape than ours, right? I do think, and I'm not talking about just, AI, virtual reality. Of course, technology will play a part, or maybe not, because we will completely destroy our planet, so we will go
Yeah. Who
back to
knows?
barbarism,
Yeah,
right? But the
exactly.
point is that that energy will still be there for them, no matter if they will be that civilization will be the direct heir to ours, like will be like a gradual evolution, like we've experienced for the last, think about it, 2,000 years, or if it will be like something will happen and they will be start from zero. But they will be different humans, completely
Yeah.
different humans.
Yeah.
So that's my answer.
I appreciate that. It's interesting to me that like reality has taken on this quality, and I have also tried to back away from a news diet, right? I mean, I'm in the news business a little bit locally. I mean, I host a show on local politics and whatnot, so I do it with
So
local stuff, but not
you have to be involved,
a
yeah.
little bit. Yeah, yeah. But it's interesting that like reality, at least on the macro level, has taken on this sort of surreal, almost orchestrated ridiculousness. And it seems like something or some, I mean, I don't want to say it's all being manipulated, but it seems like there's an energy that's kind of pushing us in a certain direction, almost to the extreme of where like the materialist paradigm, both economically and scientifically, can't hang anymore. Like
Yeah,
we're getting pushed to a point where there's going to be some sort of intellectual collapse where we're going to have to reassess so many things or we're going to have to die. I mean, and it
I
seems like
agree with
that's
you
the
100%.
point.
Like, you know, I am politically, I would say maybe center left, and
Mhm.
I mean, let's say I'm not a Trump fan. I'm gonna leave it at that. At the
Yeah.
same time, I do think that the various Trumps, Elon Musk, the tech bros, the accelerationists, they are embodying a need for change. Because the truth of the matter is that while a lot of these people represent everything I despise, it's not like the status quo was any better. It's just that it was the less of two evil, but it was still evil, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
It
Yeah.
was still an anti-human sentiment. And it's so history tells us, and I would say spirituality tells us, I mean, look at alchemy again. You cannot go to the highest level of the great work, the alchemical great work, if you don't pass to the nigredo phase. The nigredo is Latin for blackness. The nigredo phase is the moment of putrefaction, right? You have to go to dissolution. You have to go to putrefaction. Only by doing that, the dross, it goes away, and then what's worth remains, and you can build from that. I feel like the in many ways the Eon of Horus, this Thelemic age that I definitely have evidence that's around us. It's this force and this fire, especially this fire, that is going to help this putrefaction, this dissolution phase to reach its maturity, so that
Yeah.
finally we can start build something else.
Something
The
new.
reality
Yeah.
is that it's not going to be pretty.
Yeah.
And again, magical practices, and especially the magical practices that celestial ascent that then leads you to the understanding of the mystical side of things, will help you stay safe and sane. Because if there's a lot of talk about, especially in recent years and especially in recent months, about how, it's so we have to rebuild communities. Communities are important, of course, they're fundamental. But if we're unhappy and unhealthy ourselves, if there's something in ourselves that's cracked, every community we reach will be poisoned, because we will be the ones poisoning the well, right?
Exactly
And
right. You can't get away from the poison if it's coming from us.
exactly.
Yeah.
So you have to heal yourself first. And healing yourself first really means, to me, finding a magical mystical practice that works for you. Again, I'm not selling you my version of it, even if I think it's the best. But at the same time,
Yeah.
you find your own, and by you do it. And
Yeah.
it doesn't matter if it's boring at first. It doesn't matter if you're not getting any results. Remember, you know, we are now at the tail end of what I call yet another magical revival. Like, these things come, in my lifetime, I've seen at least three. And this one, where it's ending right now, started around 2016, and then, was very, very, it was helped by the pandemic, the fact that everybody was staying at home. And now it's dwindling. And it's dwindling because most people that bought into it, bought into the witchcraft craze, bought into the manifestation craze, the astrology craze, and to a degree, the magical craze. Most of them came to this not because they wanted to heal themselves. They wanted to get things done. They needed a better job. They needed a better boyfriend or girlfriend. They needed,
Yeah.
I don't know, more money. They needed things. So in many ways, it was a commodification. It was a commercialization of these practices. And again, I have to be honest. I have benefited from that, because that was helped me, getting the book deals, getting my platform up, the courses, the retreats that I'm doing. I mean, we live in a capitalist world. I mean, you got to make money, right?
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
benefited from that, but I always insisted that, be wary of those who are trying to sell you this practice only as a way to get things, right?
Yeah.
And because, again, I understand that's what most people need. We all need, more money, because, again, living in a capitalist world, unless you are born with a golden spoon, you will need more money to live a decent life.
Yeah.
But the truth of the matter is that none of these things, not even the money, will heal you. Healing, it's needed, it's fundamental, and it's going to be unpleasant for a while. And again, there's no way around, right? And I guess that we're going to be forced to have these discussions more and more, because, as we said from the beginning of this conversation, the world outside has changed. The world we cannot see is here, and it's going to be here more and more and more and more.
Yeah.
I really wish that people, especially in the UFO community, UFO Sky, not UFO Twitter anymore, thankfully. Blue Sky is a really nice platform. I hope it
It
stays like this.
is.
It
Yeah,
really
and it's
feels like the old Twitter of, I don't know, 2018, 2020.
yeah,
So I
real
hope it stays.
democratic. Like the people are also in charge. There's no, I mean, it's cool. Anyway,
So far, fingers
so
crossed.
far, yes. I
But
mean,
anyway, like, what I really think, that I hope that more people in ufology, and I'm talking about ufology because that has been the vector right now for this discussion to reach the mainstream, right? But my point is that stop putting so much, stress on government disclosure. The government is not your friend. It never was, it never will be. The government is a needed evil. I think I'm not an anarchist. I really
yeah,
think that we're better off in a functioning governed society. But it's the lesser of two evils again, right?
yeah,
And
yeah,
they
yeah,
don't have, nobody who goes up there. Um, they don't have your best interest in mind. So don't expect them to tell you anything, because, again, you have all the tools right now to disclose whatever needs to be disclosed for yourself, and then you eventually realize, oh, it was there with us all the time. There's nothing to disclose. So
yeah. It's interesting. I've been listening to this podcast, Telepathy Tapes. Have you heard of this?
I've heard about it, but I haven't listened to it yet. It's definitely on my
Yeah.
need to listen.
well, in this day and age, there's content everywhere, and it's hard to know what's really, really good and all of that. But this podcast is amazing about kids who have nonverbal autism,
Hmm.
and they are severely challenged by their physical condition, but they are way smarter than people have been giving them credit for. And a lot of these kids are learning to communicate using spellers and some, either electronic devices or flat out learning how to type on iPads and stuff.
Uh-huh.
And what they're revealing through these communications is that a lot of them apparently have the ability to astral travel and read minds. And the evidence for this stuff is like blatantly available from this according to this documentarian and all of the repeated studies she's done and the scientists she's talking to. There's this thing
That's
happening.
fantastic. Wow.
And
Okay.
to me, if I mean, and this is like different than all the other telepathy stuff that we've seen from Dean Radin and those types where it's a small effect, but it's constant, like we pretty much discovered, I think, through the science that everybody has a little bit of an inkling of ESP or that kind of
Yeah.
connective power, but usually it manifests only to a small degree and it's diminishing according to boredom and other things. There's just a lot of challenges, and it's not something that we can obviously use to advantage in our day-to-day lives because these kids are limited in their personal physical mobility and
They have
they're
more access to it.
yeah, they are just locked into it because that is basically all they know, and they're kind of alienated from their own bodies. And to communicate, they have to find some control of their physical body and then learn to communicate. So it's bringing them out of their shells, but it's also allowing us a glimpse in to what their internal
Well,
world is. And they are all talking about a place that they go and they hang out and they visit and they give each other support, talking about encountering non-human intelligences that
that's
offer
amazing. Well,
them
I need to listen to
guidance.
this podcast. Wow. Okay.
Yeah, it's just fantastic. And it's like basically, if this is reproducible, and it certainly seems like it absolutely would be, uh, then there is a real chink in the armor of physical materialism,
Oh, absolutely.
and that ontology might, start to have some significant cracks in its foundation. But that is just mind blowing because it points to everything that you're saying about like this, the spheres of existence and growing and being souls and trying to evolve forward, having a spark of the divine. That's all they're talking about. I mean, that's
I mean, think
exactly
about it.
verbatim.
Think about it also like what is the most important power of the Sphinx, right? Like there's this four powers that every magician should learn to master, which is, to will, to dare, to know, and then to keep silent, right? That silence is a lot of people always try to frame it as, well, you shouldn't tell the secrets of magic or the secrets of initiation. No, no, that silence is the stillness, more maybe the stillness that these kids are forced by their own their own autism, but that
Yeah,
stillness, that silence inside, that help other voices to come up, other things, other thoughts to come up. When we reach that stillness, and again, this is what magic and mysticism help you do.
yeah,
That stillness is when we say in Telema, and that's when you start hearing the voice of the angel, which is the voice of God, really, or the
yeah,
divine. And that's, by doing that, by finally listening, by toning down the noise of the world around us, of incarnation, really, by toning down the noise of the friction of space and time, then, eternity can emerge. And that's when you start to see the world in a different way, right?
yeah. Like you said,
So
rise above it and see the whole picture rather than the
precisely.
linear time. Yeah,
Yeah, exactly, exactly that. And again, it is possible. I'm telling you, it's relatively easy too, in the sense that it doesn't require specific talent. There are things in magic and mysticism that require specific talents. This doesn't. This needs constancy, like doing it, like stick with it every day for a long period of time. And a long period of time, I always say like at least 9 months, at
yeah,
least 9 months to get started. And by 9 months, I mean every day without fail. You skip a day, you add a day. You skip 2 days, you add 2 days. Skip a week, etc. Right?
yeah,
And that's where a lot of people falter because again we live in a world where we don't have time, we have commitments, we have jobs, we have things to do, place to be, life to live, right, in
mhm,
many ways. But the more you tether yourself to life, the less you are able to see that there is another life, that will be, you will get there, but the moment you die, but you can and should start preparing for it right now. That's what all the Egyptians used to do. Their entire lives were about preparing for the afterlife, right?
Yeah.
The opening of the mouth ceremony, which is something that Peter describes in Stairway to Heaven, something we will attempt in Joshua 3 in a few months. It's a ceremony that basically, was done to the mummy, to the cadaver, but the Egyptian of 2,000 years ago, 3,000 years ago, was preparing their entire lives for that moment. Because again, realizing that what we call the afterlife truly is a different vibrational reality. And that's possibly where, what we call the UAP, non-human intelligence, that's where they come from. In the sense that I don't say they even come from anywhere. They just move frequencies, right? That's why maybe they appear and disappear. They're here now and 2,000 miles away, because they just like pop out of existence and pop down back into existence, right? Mm-hmm. And we see that there is this, I always say this, so sorry if I already told you, but there is this incredible short novel from the 1800s called Flatland. I don't remember the name of the writer, but it's very famous, and it's mostly a critique of the Victorian age, with all like very case system, if you want, like very structured. But the way this critique is presented, because the person who wrote it was also a mathematician, is by imagining a world that exists on a two-dimensional plane, right? So there's no third dimension; it's just two dimension, and at some point. So basically, you would see, like a line would be a line, a point would be a point, etc., etc. At some point, not spoiling it all, but basically a third dimensional being starts to appear into this flatland. And of course, at first they see a point, and then they see a line, and then they see a point, and then they disappear again, because it's a third dimensional thing that enters a flat place. Yeah. And so, is it the same thing that happens with the? Yeah, is it the same thing that happens with this? And imagine if maybe you think it's just you are here, right, in the flatland, and this is the third dimensional being with this end, and then this thing comes down, and you think you see 5 different things, but they're the same thing. It's just that it exists in a different dimension. This is what happens. This is what spirits are. This is what gods and goddesses and jinn and all these things are. And again, when I speak about they're all the same, I'm not saying they're exactly all the same. They're religion, right? Like imagine all the taxonomies you can imagine. There's plenty of them, right? Yeah. I also think that some of this non-human intelligence might be physical beings from this universe. However, I'll tell you very clearly, I never met them. I never met in all my trafficking with and consorting with spirits. I never met with any spirits that say, yes, I'm from Alpha Centauri, or I am from, I live in a planet like this. But
oh, you mean like an alien from somewhere physically in our universe? Exactly. Interesting.
I never had any experience like that. I know plenty of people have. Yeah. I always wonder, did they really though? Or was their cultural lenses and whatever they were prepared to, how they were prepared to decode the information? Because another thing that I can tell you, in my experience, another reason why you need that body of light, that circle, it's because these multidimensional, and let's call them multidimensional because that's what they are, intelligences, they are much more energetically potent than we are. Like being untethered from time and space means that there's more energy being generated, right? Yeah. Exposure to that energy, if you're not ready, can be debilitating, right? Yeah. So Michael Berthiaud, which is still alive, one of my mentors, is almost 90, lives in Chicago. He wrote a lot of books. In Ontological Graffiti, he speaks about the good UFO versus the bad UFO experience. And he speaks in lay terms, he says, right, like the bad UFO experiences, when it's not, government black ops doing horrible things to their own citizens, like MK Ultra, etc. Yeah. When it's actual genuine, NHI contact, it's seen as scary, it's seen as debilitating, it's seen from time to time maybe even fatal, because it happened to people that were not ready to withstand the
Yeah.
energy being generated. Or I would argue also that if somebody comes and say, hey, I've been visited by this guy from the Pleiades, maybe they're just received an information from this being that tries to emulate the way we converse, and
Absolutely.
tries to give a data dump that
Mhm.
this person's brain can understand.
Yeah.
So another reason why maybe it's important to learn magic, because then your mental banks expand, and you can start getting in more information, and then start to entertain the idea that, I don't know, if we do believe that Einstein relativity is valid, then we also know that nothing can go faster than the speed of light, which kind of makes interstellar travel impossible.
Difficult. Yeah, yeah, exactly.
So,
Well, it's interesting to me that idea that you mentioned about people kind of either having an error or kind of polluting what they're getting and decoding
yeah.
it in maybe a way that is not exactly a true representation. I'm reminded of Jane Roberts and her Seth channeling, which I've
Hmm.
fascinated me. I went through a phase where I read a bunch of those books, and it's really, really powerful, compelling stuff. And Seth, the presence, intelligent Seth, in the course of those books, makes it plain that he can only work with what the person has on board. Like he's
Yeah.
manifesting through her. And so he's limited by her language and her awareness and conceptual framework in order to deliver the things that he wants to deliver. So it's very much shaped by her
Yeah.
and her thinking. And then also, like, in remote viewing, they talk about analytical overlay, right? Like they're
Mhm.
trying to channel a picture of something that's away, and then they sometimes their thoughts will get out and construct something, and they've got to learn how to tell the difference between actual signal and the
Yeah.
noise of
The noise,
their
absolutely.
intellectual mind. So I mean, all of that, a lot of that stuff could be structure that is self-generated when you're getting the signal and not
Yeah.
even realizing that that's happening. And that
Absolutely.
kind of goes back to my first point. I mean, how do you, if we want to be true receivers of this kind of wisdom, we need to have that rational framework at a low level so that
Yeah.
we're not polluting what we're getting, but that we also can keep our thoughts and organized and have a way to approach it. So how would you say, what is the balance there of like having enough of a system in your mind that you can begin to kind of work within those dynamics, but not clouding
Well,
it up with labels and
look,
garbage.
look, look, look at the tarot, right? If you look at the tarot, the original name of the magician card is Le Batelier, right? Le Batelier means it's been translated in multiple ways, but it's a juggler, right? You have to learn to juggle the analytical, logical mind and the supra-rational aspect of this all. There's no way around it. Like
Yeah,
you will never be able to tell yourself, I need to shut down my logical mind. You won't be able to. You're a human
yeah,
being. That's how we've been um, programmed. I mean, I don't know. Maybe this is a bit controversial, but let's say this is who we are, right?
yeah, yeah, yeah.
That's who we are. We try to look for patterns. We try to make order. That's who we are. However, and this is what magic helps, right? Because magic is an attempt, especially magic with decay, which is this system that Crowley cobbled together, trying to mix and match techniques from the Far East, yoga, tantra, who are more mystical in nature, and more, I would say, practical, ceremonial, ritualistic, aesthetically pleasing in many ways practices from the West. That whatever it came from the tradition of the grimoires, which in turn, there are remnants of a lost tradition that come from Alexandrian Hermeticism, and then maybe goes back once again to Egypt, and then maybe once again to India, right? So magic helps kind of still or appease the logical mind a little bit,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, yeah,
In
yeah.
my book, I think I made an error. In my book,
Mm-hmm.
I start with all the table of correspondences, right? Because
Mm-hmm.
what one thing that the Golden Dawn did first, and then Crowley, inherited, and then everybody else did after him, Using Hermetic Kabbalah, which is a bastardization, a simplification of Jewish Kabbalah, using it as a map of reality, using the glyph of the tree of life as a map of reality where everything can be mapped. Well, this creates, of course, a very complex and very engaging system of correspondences, whereby, for instance, if we want to get all the correct ingredients for a successful invocation of the planetary spirit of Mercury, then we go and see everything that's connected with the sphere of Hod, the paths that connect Hod to the other Sephiroth, and then we can bring all this together, and then maybe we have enough material, enough ingredients in the cauldron that we're stirring to get something out that it's a successful invocation of the mercurial spirits.
Yeah.
However, I should have put those correspondences at the end of the book, I think, not at the beginning, because I realized, in the almost 2 years that the book has been out now, I had two types of feedback. One, maybe the one you told me earlier on, and even in previous conversation, like, I know this is useful because this helps me like putting things into into boxes in a way. Like I have to structuralize this a little bit. But then a lot of people were also telling me, like I could not go past that. So I could not go through the other exercises because I felt like I was not mastering it enough. I could not memorize them all. And by the way, the ones they put in the book are like, I think they're like 1/10 of all the ones.
Well, you make a mention of that where you're like, if you were a student in the old days, you would have to have this and other stuff memorized before you could even begin to have these conversations.
And I think, honestly, I think that's the wrong approach. That's another, you don't really need to memorize them all. I mean, memorization, the art of memory, it's really useful for many reasons, mostly because it keeps your brain active. Especially as we get older, our brain starts to atrophy, and the older you get, the better the more you should have some sort of art of memory practice up and running. However, it's also true that you don't need to memorize it all, right? Because the fact of it's almost like you then get stuck into the logical process of fooling yourself into thinking you can map the infinite, and you can't, right? That is a map of reality. It's a very internally coherent, very well done map of reality, but it's still not the territory, right? So back to your question, you need to learn to juggle this need of appeasing the logical mind, and so magic helps you with that. But magic is the gateway to that embodied being that is open to you through mystical practices. You need both, and again, it's almost like you yourself are this coin that is constantly spinning, and one side is the logical magical practice, maybe the speech, and the other is the inward mystical aspect, maybe the silence. And I'm telling you this because, again, speech and silence are in fact the two sides of Horus. Horus, the mystical name of Horus in Telema is Heru-Raha. Heru-Raha is a god of the sun, right? However, it has two sides. Ra-Horukuit, which is the martial projecting force, so the speech, and Hor-Parkrat, or Hippocrates, which is the Horus, the child, the child on the lotus, the one that's seen with the finger on the lips, and it represents the mystical silence. Both things are needed.
Are necessary in order to get deep.
To get to that point.
Yeah. Last question. I mean, right around the last question. If people don't develop a light body, what is? I mean, does that have, in your mind, have something to do with their fate in the afterlife? Is there a scenario where maybe there is dissipation if you don't have like magical practices? Is that a way to secure some sort of continuity between this incarnation and the next, to your thinking?
That's a loaded question, isn't it? But yeah, you got it. You got it in one.
Okay.
If you don't do this, you will disappear at the end of this life. You have, in many ways, we only have one shot at life. I mean, again, let me preface this. This is what I believe. This is not even what I believe. This is what I know to be true. But I know it. I cannot pass this knowledge to you, right? This is a gnosis that is very much born from practice and from experience.
Yeah.
But if you listen to me now, I can tell you my truth. And my truth is that we have one shot at life. That's it. We incarnate. There will never be another James Falk. There will never be another Marco Visconti. We are here now, and that's it. Our chance to carry on is to activate this body of light, and then at the moment of death, that's when either the world goes, the curtains come down and everything goes black, and it's after you were never aware, right? Because you've been there, and that's it. Or something else happens, and that something else is that at that point you will be you, James, Marco. We will be part, or we will be masks in a collection of masks donned by God. And then from that point onward, something else will happen. What it is, I mean, I have glimpses of it, but I don't have the words for it.
Yeah.
But this is my experience of it.
Yeah.
Very, 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 very controversial question. I think a lot of people might end up being scared by hearing me this. And again, I want to tell you all, this is my truth. It doesn't have to be yours, right? I'm not here telling you, oh, this is exactly how it is. But I can tell you, this is it for me. I have no doubts will happen to me because I've seen it.
I mean, I've read that stuff basically almost precisely as you described, and then other things that are maybe not quite as severe, but that your fate in the afterlife is tied to what. It's always that your fate in the afterlife is tied to how you practice your sort of mystical sensibilities in this life, and if you don't have a solid practice, then there are things that can happen, whether it is dissipation or it's like you can, sometimes they describe it as just going to sleep until your next incarnation, or you can get lost in sort of this astral maze where you're just sort of tortured by your appetites and your fears and stuff. So no matter
I think
it's important that I think that you need to figure this yourself out and begin to kind of
during this, in many ways, this is the most important thing everybody must do through into this life. And again, I think that we're living in a moment where the incursion of the other onto this world will be more and more and more and more, so that people will be unable to ignore it, right? And so I do think that, despite the fact that, as I said, we are going to be living in a very different world. And I cannot tell you if our current civilization will survive the next few hundred years, but I know humanity will endure, but it will be a very different humanity. And at the same time, I think it will be a much more awake humanity, because there's no other choice. Like this is what we're here to do. Think of your life. Think of everything you've ever done, everything you ever aspire to, everything you want to be. You're still just something in a cocoon. It's only when this cocoon opens at the moment of death that the true experience starts. That's how I see it. This doesn't mean that you should not. This is not a nihilistic view. It doesn't mean that you should end your life earlier because you are here to experience this. And nor that you should not engage with this life to the fullest. I mean, Thelema is very much not a renunciation religion, if you want to call it a religion. It's much more a Dionysiac religion, right? Like the idea of like really experiencing life, all of it, like getting into the mire of it, the beauty, the ugly, everything, like experiencing it, but doing it with knowledge. This is the love under will of the Lamb. Love for everything, but having a focused will that controls and directs this love. This is it.
Yeah. Absolutely beautiful, Marco. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you for a fantastic conversation.
It's always a pleasure to be here. Like I think you're doing fantastic work. I mean, you are indeed one of the very few podcasts I still listen to. So thank you for all the good work you do.
Well, I appreciate that, man. I love it. I have a day job, but this is what I look forward to. This is what I think about. These questions are what I live with. And so talking with you gives me a chance to really, help the viewers and listeners think about things, but also for me to develop my own thinking. I mean, I'm still in that kind of seeking phase and trying to construct without overthinking what I'm going to be
Well
dwelling
done.
in for
Very
my
well
whole
done.
life. All right, Marco, I
So yeah.
appreciate you.
Oh, just one more thing. I would say
Yeah.
that if anybody wants to learn more about this, again, and if
Mhm.
you want to spend a few days with me and Peter Levenda in Joshua Tree, there's still a few space left for this thing we're doing. It's on, well, just follow me on Blue Sky and I can direct you to the place where you can find more about it. It's pointless to put like www. People, this can get lost all
Yeah,
the time,
yeah,
right?
yeah. What kind of turnout you've done it once before, right?
This is the first time we do it, Peter and I together.
Okay, okay,
We did it online February this year, so it's nine
okay.
months ago, and this was really like was over six weeks, and it was more like we were limited by
Yeah,
by the Zoom classroom, right? But
yeah, yeah,
still, it was about it was about looking at the all the practice of celestial ascent across history, and then I was delivering path workings, so you just listen to my voice, and a lot of people had very profound experiences. We're doing this in Joshua
sure.
Tree, which is a very active place.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
It's a sacred place for the Native Americans. We will have actually some Native medicine people that will come and maybe share their very interesting perspectives. Because at the end of the day, we are I say like we are guests on their lands. That's the truth
Yeah,
of it, right?
yeah, yeah,
And they know
absolutely.
this way better than we do. Like I can tell you that. And so also like the opportunity to be in the same space. I think Peter spoke about it in a beautiful Substack recently. Um, we're I think I'm grateful for Zoom, the fact that I mean we meet here, we can have this discussion here,
Yeah,
but nothing really beats being in the same space. Again, think about what we discussed about the body of light, the prana.
yeah.
Well, when you're in the same space, you're sharing that energy with other people. Your
Hmm.
body of light is touching theirs, and that allows for more profound experiences to happen. So
Absolutely.
I think that would be a good report. So I'll let you
Yeah.
know how it goes.
Well, and like we were saying, I mean, I think that the time and the energy now is supremely charged for
Absolutely, it is
whatever's
indeed.
going on. So if something's going to happen, it's going to be, at these in these moments and those places. So how many people do you
Jokingly,
expect?
so how many people? I think we're 35 at the moment. The cold sold out is 50. I never thought we would have more than 15. So it's like it's good.
That's going
It's
to be
gonna be a good time.
powerful. It
Yeah,
sounds
yeah.
like. I mean, if that many
I'm
people.
joking. I'm joking with Peter saying that I'm aiming that in 50 years from now, people will speak of, Levenda Visconti the same way they're speaking about Jack Parsons and Ron Hubbard, without Scientology, though.
Yeah,
That's,
yeah,
that's,
totally. Well, a friend of mine, interesting connection. He's really into Krishnamurti, right?
Mhm.
And David Bohm. And they had these dialogues that they used to do back in the 80s where they would get together
Yeah,
and they would have like kind of sort of spiritual dialogues where they would try to sort of build off each other's energy and
yeah,
collectively come to kind of an understanding. And someone he knows who is has sort of clairvoyant abilities and is well developed spiritually, went up to David Bohm at one point after Krishnamurti had passed and said, "How many would it take?" And Bohm thought for a minute and he said, "Between 6 and 20." And the question comes from this idea that how many people would it take um, to get together and facilitate some sort of triggering event that makes
yeah.
for a psychic phase change of sorts in human consciousness. And so I'm of the belief, through him and through my own fascination with Krishnamurti and others, that if you get enough people together and you get them focused on something, and there's power in that to make major, changes
Absolutely.
to the way that we understand and live in our universe.
I
So
agree with
yeah,
you. I agree with
I
you.
think we may
And
be saying
I'll
that
let you know how
Visconti
it
and
goes. I'll let you know how it goes.
all right, man.